The night was heavy and the city lights flickered weakly against the fog. People hurried home, the streets alive with the noise of footsteps, chatter, and the hum of hover carts. But in a narrow alley, hidden from the brightness, there was a faint sound. It was not the sound of machines, not the sound of people. It was a cry, weak, broken, almost fading into silence. The cry caught the ears of one man, a human. His name was Daniel, a worker who had just finished his long shift in the cargo docks. His boots were tired, his hands rough from lifting heavy crates, and his stomach growled from hunger. But the moment he heard that cry, something inside him stopped. It was the sound of a baby, a cry filled with hunger, fear, and helplessness. Daniel slowed his steps and turned his head. The alley was dark, shadows moving against the dim glow of neon signs. For a second he thought he imagined it. But then the cry came again, sharper, desperate. He could not ignore it. His feet carried him forward, even though a small voice in his mind told him to walk away. As he moved deeper, the air grew colder. The smell of rot and trash filled his nose. Then he saw it. Behind, a broken metal bin wrapped in torn fabric, was a small alien baby. The child's skin was pale blue, its tiny chest rising and falling weakly, its cry shaking the air like a whisper of life. Beside the baby, half collapsed on the ground, was a woman. She was alien, her body thin, her arms trembling, her eyes hollow with exhaustion. Her clothes were torn, and her skin showed signs of bruises and scars. She looked at Daniel as if he was both danger and hope. Daniel froze, his heart beating hard. He had seen aliens many times in this city, but never like this, never so broken. The woman tried to lift her baby, but her hands shook. Her lips moved, but no sound came out at first. Then, with a voice weaker than the baby's cry, she whispered, "Take her. Take her away." Daniel blinked, unsure if he heard her right. Are you leaving her here?" he asked quietly, his voice tight. The woman's eyes closed, a tear sliding down her cheek. She looked too weak to stand, too weak even to argue. Her hands slipped away from the baby as if she had no strength left to hold on. The baby cried louder, the sound echoing off the walls of the alley. Daniel stepped closer, his chest heavy with something he could not name. Anger, pity, sorrow, all mixed inside him. He crouched beside the child, his rough human hand brushing the torn fabric. The baby's eyes opened slightly, bright yellow with a glow that seemed fragile yet alive. Daniel felt a shiver. He had never seen a baby like this, but still it was a baby, helpless and pure. He looked at the woman. "You can't just leave her here." But she only shook her head slowly. Her lips whispered again, "I have nothing. No food, no home. She will die with me." Her words cut deep, not because they were cruel, but because they were filled with truth. Daniel swallowed hard, his throat dry. He understood hunger, he understood being poor, but he could not understand abandoning a child. And yet, here it was right in front of him, not a story, not a rumor, but real. Daniel stood for a moment, torn between walking away and stepping into something dangerous. He could already hear the voices in his head. "She's not your kind. Leave her. You can't save them, you'll only get yourself in trouble." But the baby's cry cut through all those thoughts. It was not a sound you could ignore, not if you still had a heart beating inside your chest. The woman's body shook. She coughed weakly, her eyes rolling as if she was slipping into unconsciousness. Daniel acted without thinking. He reached into his small bag and pulled out the only food he had left, a stale piece of bread from his dinner ration. He broke it and held it out. The woman's eyes widened, and for a second her pride fought her hunger. But then her hands moved slowly, trembling, and she took it. She ate like someone who had not tasted food for days. Tears slipped down her face as she chewed. The baby's cries softened, sensing its mother had strength again. Daniel watched in silence, his chest heavy. He realized this moment was not just chance. It was something more, something that would not let him go even if he tried. He looked again at the tiny alien child, still wrapped in rags, still trembling from cold. He whispered to himself, "What am I doing?" But deep down, he already knew the answer. The alley felt different now. The shadows seemed to lean closer, the city noise fading into the distance. Something dangerous was hidden in the silence, as if eyes were watching from the darkness. Daniel felt it, a chill crawling up his spine. This was only the beginning. He had stepped into a story much larger than himself, and there was no turning back. The night in the alley stretched on, but something had shifted. The woman had eaten the small piece of bread Daniel gave her, and already her hands trembled a little less. Her eyes, once empty, now carried a faint glimmer, though still clouded by exhaustion. The baby pressed against her chest, whimpering softly, sensing warmth returning to its mother. Daniel crouched beside them, unsure what to say. He had helped strangers before, but this was different. This felt dangerous, heavy, like he had opened a door that could not be closed. The woman glanced at him, suspicion still strong in her gaze, yet mixed with something else, reluctant gratitude. "Why?" she whispered, her voice rough. "Why would you give food to me, a stranger?" Daniel shrugged slightly, his tone quiet but steady. "Because you're starving and she's starving. That's reason enough." The woman lowered her eyes, almost ashamed. Her thin fingers brushed the baby's cheek, her movements shaky but gentle. For a moment she did not speak, and Daniel could hear the noise of the city faintly in the distance. Shouts, footsteps, carts rattling on the street above. But here, in the alley, there was only silence and the soft sound of a baby's breathing. The woman broke the silence with words that carried both bitterness and pain. "No one helps my kind. We are trash to them, forgotten, hunted. If they see me, they will take me away, and she—" Her voice cracked. "She will not live." Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to ask why, who was hunting her. But the look in her eyes told him this was not the time. Instead, he reached into his bag again and pulled out another piece of bread. This one smaller, but still food. "Eat it," he said firmly. "You need strength if you want to keep holding her." She hesitated, her pride resisting, but hunger forced her hand. This time she ate slower, her eyes never leaving Daniel, as if studying him. Her lips trembled as she chewed, and finally she asked softly, "What do they call you?" "Daniel," he answered simply. "And you?" he asked after a pause. "What's your name?" The woman pressed her lips together as if her name carried a weight too heavy. After a long silence, she whispered, "Syria." Daniel repeated it, almost to himself. Syria. The name felt strange but beautiful. The baby stirred, its yellow eyes blinking open for a brief moment. Daniel smiled faintly. "And what about her?" Syria looked down at her child, her expression softening despite the pain on her face. "Leora," she said gently. "Her name is Leora." The human looked at the baby and felt something deep. Inside, a pull he could not explain. He had no family in this city, no one waiting for him at home. But seeing this fragile life wrapped in rags, he felt a responsibility he had not asked for yet could not deny. Before Daniel could speak again, a sound cut through the silence. Heavy boots striking the street above, the rhythm steady, too steady. Syria froze, her body tensing, her eyes widening with fear. "They're searching," she whispered urgently. "The guards. They're looking for me." Daniel's pulse quickened, his instincts telling him danger was close. "Why?" he whispered back. "What do they want from you?" Syria shook her head quickly, clutching Leora tighter. "Later. Not here, please." Daniel scanned the alley, shadows thick and dark. He could hear the boots getting closer, the echo bouncing off the walls. Someone shouted in a language he barely understood, but the tone was sharp, commanding. Syria's hands shook as she tried to pull herself up, but her legs gave way. Daniel caught her arm before she collapsed, his voice firm. "Stay quiet. I'll handle this." The footsteps stopped at the mouth of the alley. 2 guards appeared, tall figures in dark armor, their eyes glowing faint red behind their helmets. One of them spoke. his voice metallic. "You there, human? Have you seen a female of the Glyran race pass through here?" Daniel's mind raced. He glanced at Saria, who crouched low behind the bin, clutching Leora, her breath held tight. He turned back to the guards and shook his head slowly. "No, just rats and trash down here." The guards stared at him, suspicion heavy in their gaze. One stepped forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his weapon. Daniel forced his face to remain calm. His heart pounding in his chest, he added quickly, "Why would anyone come down here? It stinks. You should try the other alleys." For a moment, silence hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Then the guard snorted, muttered something to his partner, and turned away. Their boots faded as they moved further down the street, searching elsewhere. Only when the sound was gone did Daniel let out the breath he had been holding. Saria sagged against the wall, relief and fear mixing in her eyes. "You lied for me," she whispered, almost in disbelief. Daniel looked at her firmly. "I didn't lie. I told them what I wanted them to believe." Her lips trembled as she whispered, Why risk yourself?" Daniel's answer was simple, but his voice carried the weight of a promise. "Because you and your baby deserve a chance." The baby stirred again, a soft sound breaking the silence. Daniel knelt down and gently adjusted the torn fabric around her. His rough hands were careful, almost tender. Saria watched him, her suspicion not gone, but shaken. No one had ever done this for her. Not since her world had collapsed. For the first time, she whispered words not of despair, but of fragile hope. Maybe I was wrong to give up." Daniel met her eyes, his own steady. "Then hold on," he said, "because this isn't the end. This is only the beginning." The alley was quiet again, but not peaceful. Danger still lingered outside, shadows still crept close, but inside the broken walls of that dark place, something had changed. A starving alien mother had found food, a helpless baby had found warmth, and a human had made a choice that would change all their lives. The city never truly slept. Even at night, its streets were alive with noise, glowing, lights, and the endless hum of machines. But for Daniel, Saria, and little Leora, the night was not alive. It was dangerous. They had just escaped notice from the guards, but danger was not gone, only waiting. Daniel helped Saria to her feet, her body still weak, her baby pressed tight against her chest. "We can't stay here," he whispered, his eyes scanning the alley. "They'll come back. We have to move." Saria nodded faintly, her fear stronger than her strength. She leaned on him as they stepped out of the shadows, her steps unsteady but determined. Daniel kept his arm steady, guiding her into the maze of back streets. Every sound made him tense, the rattle of pipes, the echo of laughter, the distant thump of boots. The city was a giant machine of metal and neon, with alleys that twisted like a labyrinth. Daniel had walked these streets for years, but tonight they felt different. Tonight every corner felt like a trap, every passerby like a spy. He pulled Saria into the shadows whenever someone came close. Her breathing was heavy, her eyes wide as she clutched. Leora tighter with each step. At the end of one narrow street, Daniel spotted a market square still awake. Stalls lined with glowing signs and merchants shouting about cheap food and broken tech. Crowds filled the place, aliens of many shapes moving shoulder to shoulder. Daniel thought quickly. If they hid in the crowd, maybe they could lose the Sao. "Guards, stay close," he whispered. "Don't let go of me." Saria nodded, her face pale, her baby whimpering softly under the fabric. Together they stepped into the market, the noise of voices washing over them like a storm. Daniel kept his head low, weaving through the crowd, but Saria's face, even half-hidden, drew glances. Her features carried a sharp beauty, and her tattered clothes made her stand out. "Daniel," she whispered nervously, "they will see me." He shook his head. "Just keep moving. Trust me." For a while it worked. The crowd became their shield, voices and smells masking them from searching eyes. But then, as they passed a stall selling stale fruit, a voice shouted above the noise, "Her! That's her!" The words stabbed through the market like a knife. Saria froze, her eyes snapping to the voice. An alien merchant with scarred skin stood behind his stall, pointing directly at her. His face twisted with hate, his voice loud and sharp. She is the runaway. The one with the child. Guards! Panic exploded in the square. Shoppers turned their heads, whispers rising, some stepping back as if Saria carried a disease. The merchant's shout carried across the market, and already Daniel could hear armored boots rushing toward them. Move, Daniel hissed, grabbing Saria's arm. The three of them broke into a run, weaving through the shocked crowd. The baby began to cry, the sound piercing the chaos. Saria tried to hush her, but the cry only grew louder. Daniel's heart pounded as he pushed through the crowd, knocking over crates, shoving past bodies. Behind them came the heavy crash of boots, the metallic voices of guards shouting orders. Stop them. Don't let them escape. The market became a storm of chaos. People screamed, stalls toppled, goods scattered across the ground. Daniel pulled Saria down a side street, the narrow passage lit by flickering neon signs. The guards followed, their shadows stretching across the walls. Saria's legs faltered, her strength failing. I can't, she gasped, stumbling. Daniel caught her before she fell, his voice firm. Yes, you can. Just a little more. He tightened his grip, half carrying her as they raced down the passage, but the guards were close, their footsteps echoing like thunder. They reached a junction where 3 streets split apart. Daniel hesitated, his mind racing. Left led to the industrial yards, a maze of metal and fire. Right led toward the upper districts, crowded with patrols. Straight ahead led deeper into the Undercity. A place of shadows and danger, he chose straight. They plunged into the Undercity, the light fading, the air thick with smoke. Here the walls were covered in old graffiti, the ground wet with dripping pipes. Few dared to live here, only the desperate, only the hidden. It was a place where even guards moved carefully. Still, the chase did not stop. The guards' voices echoed closer, calling Saria's name, demanding she surrender. Daniel pushed harder, his muscles burning, sweat dripping down his face. Saria clutched Leora, whispering to her, "Stay quiet, my little star. Stay with me." The baby's cries softened as if hearing her mother's plea. Finally, Daniel spotted an opening, a broken grate leading into an abandoned tunnel. Without thinking, he pulled Saria inside, crouching low as they crawled into the darkness. The tunnel was damp and smelled of rust, but it was shelter. It was escape. They pressed against the wall, holding their breath as the guards thundered past outside. The sound faded slowly, until only silence remained. Daniel exhaled heavily, leaning his head back against the wall. His arms shook from carrying Saria, his chest aching from the run. But when he looked at her, he saw something that made the struggle worth it. Saria's eyes, though still filled with fear, now carried something new. "Trust," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You saved us again." Daniel shook his head, his voice steady. "No, not yet, but we're alive, and that's enough for now." Saria pressed her cheek to Leora's head, tears sliding down her face. The baby's small breath warmed her skin, and for the first time in days, she felt something like hope. In the shadows of the Undercity, the three of them sat together, exhausted but unbroken. The chase was not over, the danger not gone, but a bond had begun, and bonds, Daniel knew, were stronger than fear. The tunnel was dark and damp, water dripping from the pipes above. Daniel leaned against the wall, his breath still heavy from the chase. Saria sat on the ground, clutching little Leora close to her chest, rocking her gently. The baby had stopped crying, her soft breaths the only sound filling the silence. For a moment it almost felt safe, but Daniel knew safety in this city was always temporary. He studied Saria's face, pale under the dim light, her eyes hollow but sharp. There was more to her than hunger, more than fear. The guards weren't chasing just another poor soul. They wanted her for a reason. Finally, Daniel broke the silence, his voice low. "You need to tell me. Why are they after you? Who are you, really?" Saria's arms tightened around Leora, her eyes lowering. "I told you I am nothing," she whispered. "Just a mother with no home, no family, no place." Daniel shook his head, his tone firm but not unkind. No, they don't hunt nobodies with this kind of force. They knew. Your face, they shouted your name. Tell me the truth, Saria. If I'm risking my life, I deserve to know. Her lips trembled, torn between silence and confession. For a long moment she said nothing, her gaze lost in the shadows of the tunnel. Then, in a voice heavy with pain, she whispered, I was not always nothing. Daniel stayed quiet, letting her speak. Saria took a slow breath, her hand brushing Leora's small cheek. I was born in House Vera, she said, her tone bitter and proud at the same time. It was once a noble house of my people, respected, feared. Our name carried weight in the council. Our fleet sailed the stars. Her eyes glistened as she remembered. But greed destroyed us. Betrayal ate us from the inside. Rivals saw our hunger during the famine, and they crushed us. Daniel listened carefully, the words heavy with history he did not fully understand, but he could see it in her eyes. The weight of loss, the scars of pride turned to ruin. I was the last daughter of my house. Saria continued, her voice shaking. When our lands were burned, when our ships were taken, I was spared only because I ran. I carried Leora inside me then. I thought maybe if I reached the city I could survive. Maybe my child would live. She lowered her head, shame flooding her expression. But here they do not see me as a noble. They see me as trash, a fallen name, a broken woman. They would rather see me and my child erased than remember what my house once was. Daniel clenched his fists, anger rising inside him. He had seen injustice before, but never like this, never with a child involved. They want to kill you just because of who you are, he muttered, his voice sharp. Saria nodded, her eyes filling with tears. They call it cleansing, erasing the remnants. If they take me, they will not let Leora live either. They will see her as a threat, a reminder of House Vera. The baby stirred, letting out a soft sound, and Saria kissed her forehead, her lips trembling. I thought leaving her in the alley would save her, she whispered. If someone found her, maybe she would live. But I could not let go. I could not walk away. And then you appeared. Her eyes met Daniel's, filled with both shame and gratitude. I do not understand why you helped me, but without you, we would already be gone. Daniel felt a lump in his throat. He was just a dock worker, an ordinary man with no power, no name in this alien world. Yet here he was, protecting a fallen, noble woman and her fragile child. He sighed and spoke firmly. You don't have to understand, just know that I won't let them take her. Or you. Saria's lips parted, shocked by his words. Why? She whispered. Why risk so much? For me. Daniel's answer was simple, his eyes steady. Because no one else will, and because it's the right thing to do. For a long moment, silence filled the tunnel. Saria looked at him, studying his face, his rough hands, his tired eyes. She saw no wealth, no power, no reason for him to help her. Yet he had given her food, lied for her, carried her, and now promised to protect her. Her heart, broken for so long, felt a small spark of warmth. It scared her almost as much as the guards. Suddenly, a sound echoed. Down the tunnel, metal clanging against stone, footsteps faint but approaching. Daniel's body tensed immediately, pulling Saria to her feet. They're still searching, he hissed, his eyes narrowing. Saria's grip on Leora tightened, fear flashing in her eyes. We can't stay here, Daniel said firmly. We need to find somewhere safe, somewhere they won't look. She hesitated, then whispered. There is a place, but it is dangerous too. The ruins of my house lie beyond the lower districts. No one dares go there. It is cursed, forgotten. But maybe there, they won't follow. Daniel frowned, the idea sounding reckless. But the way Saria's voice trembled told him she was serious. The ruins of your house, he repeated slowly. You think we'll be safe there? She nodded, her eyes shining with both fear and resolve. It is all I have left. If they want me erased, then let us hide among the ashes of what they already destroyed. Daniel looked at her, then at the baby. He knew it was madness, But he also knew the city was no longer safe. The guards would never stop. The alleys and markets would always betray them. If there was even a chance the ruins could shield them, he had to try. "All right," Daniel said finally, his voice steady. "Take me there." Saria's eyes widened, surprised that he agreed so quickly. She nodded slowly, whispering, "Then we go at dawn, when the city is still waking, when the guards are tired." Daniel gave a small nod, his hand resting briefly on Leora's tiny blanket. The baby stirred softly, her glow-like eyes opening for a moment. Daniel whispered to her, almost like a promise, "We'll get you somewhere safe." The tunnel fell into silence again, but this time it was filled with a sense of purpose. The secret of the fallen house was no longer hidden, and the path ahead, though dangerous, was clear. Together, they would walk into the ruins of the past, and perhaps in the ashes find a chance for survival. The first light of dawn touched the city. The towers of metal and glass gleamed faintly in the mist, and the markets were already waking. Vendors pulled open their stalls, voices called out, smells of food and oil filled the air. To most it was an ordinary morning, but for Daniel, Saria, and little Leora, every step was a risk, every breath was a gamble. They moved quietly through the crowd, Saria's hood pulled low to hide her face. Daniel walked beside her, carrying a small bundle of old cloths to make them look like poor travelers. The baby was wrapped tightly, her soft breathing hidden under layers of fabric. Saria's arms ached, but she did not complain, not when Leora's warmth reminded her why she could not give up. Daniel's eyes scanned the market. It was noisy, chaotic, but that chaos was their shield. If they blended in, they might pass unnoticed, but he knew too well that danger could appear at any moment. They stopped at a stall to buy water, Daniel trading the last of his credits. The merchant, a tall alien with dark ridged skin, gave them a long stare. His eyes lingered on Saria, and Daniel felt the tension rise, but the man only handed him the bottle and turned away, muttering under his breath. Daniel guided Saria forward, whispering, "Keep moving, don't stop." For a time, it worked. They passed food stalls, tool vendors, even a group of street performers drawing a small crowd. Saria's heartbeat slowed, and for a fragile moment, hope flickered. Perhaps they could slip through the market, leave the city, and reach the ruins unnoticed. But hope is fragile, and betrayal waits in shadows. As they crossed the center of the market, a voice rang out, sharp and loud. "There! That's her!" The words cut through the noise like a blade. Saria froze, her eyes wide with terror. Daniel turned his head quickly, his heart sinking. It was the fruit vendor from the night before, the same scarred alien who had pointed at Saria. His eyes gleamed with spite, his hand raised high, pointing directly at her. "She's the runaway, the traitor of House Vera. Guards, over here." The market erupted. People stumbled back, some gasped, others shouted. Fear spread quickly as if Saria carried a curse. Mothers pulled their children away. Merchants slammed their stalls shut. The crowd that had been their cover now became a wall of eyes, dozens of faces staring, whispering, judging. Daniel grabbed Saria's arm, his voice urgent. "Run!" They pushed through the crowd, but panic worked against them. People stepped aside, leaving an open path for the guards who were already storming into the square. "Stop them!" the scarred vendor screamed, his voice carrying above the chaos. "Stop the human and the mother!" The guards advanced, armored and ruthless. Their glowing red eyes swept across the market, their weapons drawn. Daniel shoved past a group of aliens, knocking over a cart of glowing fruits. The crash bought them a moment, but not enough. Behind them, boots thundered. Shouts echoed. Weapons buzzed with energy. Saria's hood slipped, her face exposed. Gasps filled the air, her identity clear. A fallen noblewoman, once powerful, now hunted. Some spat at her. Others whispered her name like a curse. "House Vera," someone muttered. She should have died with the rest of them. Daniel's rage flared, but he did not stop. He pulled Saria into a narrow side street, weaving through the twisting alleys. The baby cried loudly, her small voice cutting through the noise. Saria tried to hush her, but the fear in her chest made her own voice shake. The guards pursued, faster now, their footsteps closing in. Daniel's lungs burned, his muscles screamed, but he did not slow. Every corner they turned seemed to lead to another dead end, another blocked path. The city itself felt like it wanted to trap them. At last they reached a wider street, and Daniel spotted an old transport station, its gates rusted, its roof half collapsed. "Inside!" he shouted, dragging Saria toward it. They slipped into the shadows of the broken station just as the guards poured into the street behind them. The hunters scanned the area, weapons raised, voices echoing. "They're close, spread out, find them." Inside the ruin, Daniel pulled Saria behind a crumbling wall. She clutched Leora tightly, her body trembling, her eyes filled with panic. "We can't keep running," she whispered, her voice cracking. "They won't stop. They'll never stop." Daniel put a hand on her shoulder, firm and steady. "Then we don't stop either. We stay ahead of them. We fight if we must. But we don't give up." Tears slid down Saria's face, her pride battling her fear. She looked at Daniel, seeing not just a man but a wall standing between her and the world. "You don't understand," she whispered. "The betrayal started long ago. Even here, even in this market, people want me gone. They want to erase everything I was, everything my child is." Daniel met her gaze, his voice sharp with anger. "Then let them hate, let them curse. But they won't take her, not while I'm breathing." In the distance, the guards' voices grew louder. The ruin shook as boots pounded closer. The market had betrayed them, the crowd had turned. But in that broken station, something unbreakable was forming. A human and a fallen alien mother stood together, cornered but not defeated. The betrayal was real, the danger greater than ever. But Daniel knew one thing. They were not running forever. The city slowly faded. Behind them, after hours of moving through alleys, old tunnels, and half-collapsed bridges, Daniel and Saria finally reached the edge of the lower districts. Here, the noise of markets and patrols gave way to silence. The air was thick with dust, the streets cracked and broken. The buildings nothing but skeletons of stone and steel. Daniel stopped, looking at the ruins before them. They stretched far, like the bones of a dead giant, towers half buried in rubble, doorways leading to nothing but darkness. "This is it," Saria whispered, her voice shaking. "The remains of House Vera." She stepped forward, clutching Leora close, her eyes heavy with both pain and memory. Daniel followed, his boots crunching against broken glass. The ruins were strange, beautiful and sad at the same time. He could almost imagine what they had been once, halls filled with light, banners flying proudly, voices echoing with laughter and command. Now there was only silence, only ghosts. Saria guided him through a crumbled archway into what had once been a grand hall. The roof was half collapsed, letting in thin beams of pale light. Shattered columns leaned at dangerous angles, vines crawling over them like veins. "This was our gathering hall," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Where leaders spoke, where families gathered, where songs were sung." She touched the broken wall with trembling fingers, as if the stone itself still carried the warmth of the past. Daniel stayed quiet, letting her speak for the first time. He saw not only her fear but her pride, the strength of someone who had lost everything yet still carried the weight of it inside. They settled in a corner where rubble made a small shelter, hidden from the open arches. Daniel searched the area for danger, but it was silent, too silent. "Will they come here?" he asked, lowering his voice. Saria shook her head. "No one dares enter. They say these ruins are cursed. The guards avoid this place. Even scavengers keep away. Only I return because I cannot let go." Daniel glanced at her, seeing the pain in her eyes. "You're safe here then, at least for now," he said quietly. Saria nodded, holding Leora close as the baby slept, her small chest rising and falling. For the first time in days, Saria's body eased just slightly, as if the weight on her shoulders lightened. Daniel rummaged through his bag, pulling out the little food he had left, some dry roots, a piece of stale bread, and half a bottle of water. "It's not much," he said, handing it to her. but it will keep us alive tonight. Saria took it, her hands trembling as she shared small bites with Leora, dipping the bread in water to soften it for the child. Watching the baby nibble made Daniel's chest tighten. It was such a simple act, but it felt like victory, like defiance against a world that wanted them erased. When the meal was finished, Saria leaned back against the wall, her voice soft. "You should not be here, Daniel. You are human. You owe me nothing, and yet you carry burdens that are not yours." Daniel shook his head, his tone firm. "I may owe you nothing, but I can't ignore you. You and Leora deserve to live, that's enough for me." Her eyes glistened, her lips trembling. "You sound like my father," she whispered. "He said the same when the famine began. He swore we would survive, that our name would not vanish. But when the betrayal came, even he could not stop it." Her voice broke, tears sliding down her face. Daniel wanted to say something, but instead, he let her cry, the sound echoing softly in the ruins. It was not weakness, he realized, but release. The night deepened, shadows stretching across the broken stones. Daniel built a small fire from dry scraps, the flames faint, but enough to warm them. He sat close, keeping watch, his eyes sharp, his body tense. Every sound outside made him grip the pipe he carried as a weapon. But the ruins remained silent, as if guarding them. Saria lay with Leora curled against her chest, the firelight flickering across her tired face. For a moment she looked peaceful, almost like the noble woman she once had been. Daniel studied her quietly, realizing how far she had fallen, and yet how strong she still was. She had not given up. Not really. Even when she tried to leave her child behind, something in her refused. And now, with him beside her, she had begun to hope again. Hours passed, and the city above grew quiet. Daniel's eyes grew heavy, but he forced himself to stay awake. Then, faintly, he heard it. A noise outside the ruins, distant but real. Boots on stone, voices low, metal scraping. He stiffened, gripping his pipe, tightly, his heart pounding. "They found us," he muttered under his breath. Saria stirred, her eyes snapping open. Fear returned, sharp and heavy. "No," she whispered, clutching Leora tightly. "Not here. Not in my house." Daniel moved closer to the broken archway, peering into the shadows beyond. Figures moved in the distance, dark shapes against the pale moonlight. Not guards, not soldiers. Different, smaller, ragged, scavengers. Daniel's jaw tightened. Scavengers were desperate, dangerous, and often worse than guards. They had no law, no mercy, only hunger and greed. He turned back quickly, his voice low but urgent. "Stay behind me, don't make a sound." Saria's eyes widened, her body trembling again. Daniel stepped into the open, pipe in hand, his voice steady, though his heart raced. The ruins were no longer silent. The ghosts of House Vera had new visitors. And if Daniel failed, there would be no tomorrow for Saria or her child. The ruins of House Vera were silent no more. The faint fire Daniel had built flickered weakly, its glow barely reaching the broken walls. But beyond the archway, shadows moved, voices murmured, and the crunch of boots grew louder. The scavengers had come, drawn by the chance of prey, and in this place of death, mercy was never given. Daniel gripped the iron pipe in his hand, its weight heavy but steady. He had no armor, no weapons of fire or steel, but he had his will. Behind him, Saria clutched Leora to her chest, her body trembling as she pressed into the corner of the ruined hall. Her wide eyes shone with fear, but also something else. Faith. Faith in the human who had chosen to stand between them and death. The first scavenger stepped into the hall, his body thin, his eyes glowing faintly in the dark. He carried a jagged blade made of scrap metal, his smile twisted. "Well, well," he hissed. "What do we have here? A fallen noble and her little brat, and a human fool." His laugh echoed off the stone, harsh and cruel. More figures followed, 6 in total, each armed with blades, pipes, and broken rifles. Their movements were slow, confident, like wolves, circling wounded prey. Daniel's heart pounded, but he did not move back. He stepped forward instead, his shoulders squared. "You're not touching them," he said firmly, his voice steady. The scavengers laughed, the sound sharp and mocking. "And who will stop us?" one sneered. "You, human." Daniel didn't answer with words. He answered with his stance. He planted his feet on the broken floor, gripping his pipe tighter. Every part of him screamed, to run, to hide. But something stronger rooted him there. This was his line, and he would not step back. The scavengers spread out, two moving toward the fire, their blades glinting in the glow. Saria held Leora tighter, whispering to her child, her eyes never leaving Daniel. She wanted to scream, to beg him to run, but her voice caught in her throat. This man, this human, was the only wall between her and the end. The first attacker lunged, swinging his blade down. Daniel raised his pipe, the metal clashing with a sharp ring. The shock ran through his arms, but he pushed forward, twisting. He slammed the end of the pipe into the scavenger's chest, sending him stumbling back into rubble, coughing and snarling. The others hissed, their smiles gone. Now they saw he was not prey but a fighter. They came together, circling him, testing his guard. Daniel's breath grew heavy, sweat sliding down his face, but his eyes stayed sharp. He moved like a dock worker who had fought for every meal, every scrap. He was not trained, but he was determined, and determination gave him strength. A second scavenger rushed in, aiming low. Daniel sidestepped, slamming his pipe across the man's jaw. The crack echoed in the hall, and the scavenger collapsed, blood dripping from his mouth. The others growled, circling faster. One raised a broken rifle, aiming at Saria. Daniel's eyes widened, rage flaring in his chest. With a roar, he hurled his pipe like a spear, striking the scavenger's arm. The shot fired into the wall, sparks raining down, but Saria and Leora were safe. Daniel dashed forward, reclaiming his weapon. His arms ached, his lungs burned, but he refused to stop. Every strike, every swing, was not for himself, but for the mother and child behind him. The scavengers cursed, striking harder, but Daniel blocked, dodged, and fought with the fury of someone who had nothing to lose and everything to protect. One by one, the scavengers fell back, groaning, bleeding, their confidence shaken. The leader snarled, his blade raised high. "You'll die for them, human." He spat. Daniel's eyes burned, his voice like steel. "Then I'll die standing." The leader lunged faster than the rest. Their weapons clashed again and again, sparks flying in the dark. Daniel's arms screamed with pain, but he held firm. Finally, with a desperate swing, he smashed the pipe against the leader's head. The scavenger crumpled to the ground, silent. The hall went quiet. The remaining scavengers cursed, dragging their wounded, retreating into the shadows. Their voices faded, leaving only silence, only the crackle of the dying fire. Daniel stood shaking, his body bruised, blood dripping from his lip, but he was still standing. Slowly, he turned, his eyes meeting Saria's. She was on her knees, tears streaming down her face, her arms tight around Leora. Her lips trembled as she whispered, You stood against them. You fought for us." Daniel dropped his pipe, his voice hoarse. "I told you, they won't take you. Not while I live." Saria's tears fell freely, her pride shattered by gratitude. She looked at him, not as a stranger, not as a human outsider, but as something more. A protector, a savior. She whispered through her tears, "Then maybe House Vera is not dead. Maybe it lives. Through her, through me, because of you." Daniel sank against the wall, exhaustion washing over him, but when he looked at Leora, her glowing eyes wide and innocent, he felt strength again. He reached out, brushing her small hand with his. Rough fingers, she gripped him weakly, and something deep inside him shifted. She was no longer just Saria's child. In his heart, she was his too. The ruins of House Vera stood silent once more. But within the broken stones, something new had begun. Not the end of a house, but the beginning of a bond stronger than blood. A human had stood, and in standing he had changed everything.